Ice cold, ice cold, ice cold. I have gone ice cold here on Doubling Down, which hasn't happened over the course of the about 75 episodes that we've had. Usually we'll sprinkle in some winners. This is the coldest streak I've been on. And I'm actually happy to say goodbye to the Derby prep races because if you follow me in my picks in October, November, December, January. That's when I do really well on the Derby Trail. And then once we get past about the Lecomte, maybe the Risen Star, my tips really start to fall off. And then the Belmont Stakes is where I'm going to strike again. So in order to get off this cold streak, and I will say, if you follow my viewers or my guests, they've done very well here on Doubling Down. This is Doubling Down. I'm your host, Colin Sheen, and I welcome in a new voice this week, and we go to Keeneland on Friday to look at a couple two-year-old races. Two-year-old races are tricky for some when there's not a lot of information to go off of in the past performances. So we're bringing in a specialist for those two-year-old races. Stay tuned for this episode of Doubling Down.
Trust the Profits is proud to be sponsored by Game of Silks. Go to silks.io to get in the game. Real ownership, real races, real rewards.
Welcome in. I'm your host, Colin Shee, and this is Doubling Down. And I have a new voice on the show, as I've said from day one, episode one, as we go into episode about 75 this week. I always want to have different perspectives, always different voices. And I've had a nice rotation of different guests on. And this week, we welcome in a new voice. That is the 2YOEDGEMAN. You can find his content over on pastthewire.com, a contributor for that website, mainly focused on two-year-olds. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Hey, Colin, thanks a bunch. I'm doing great. Appreciate you having me on here today.
Absolutely. And with a name like the 2YOEDGEMAN, we have to assume that we're going to go Friday. We found a daily double with back-to-back two-year-old races. So it timed out perfect to have you on.
How about that? Yeah, you don't get that very often, but couldn't have been any better than that.
What's your history in horse racing and handicapping? How did you become the 2YOEDGEMAN? Has that always been where you have felt your strength is to play?
It is, Colin. Yeah, I mean, going way back to when I was a teenager, I always enjoyed the bloodlines and the pedigree side of the game. And that kind of led me to the two-year-olds. And then obviously it was a deal where when I was a kid, I didn't have enough money to make a bet every race, even if it was $2. So I had to kind of parcel out the wallet there and specialize. And it really turned out well for me to really focus exclusively, frankly, on the two-year-old maiden special races at some of the better tracks. I mainly focus in Kentucky and New York, are the two kind of circuits that I follow closely. But yeah, I've been doing it for a long time, and it's a lot of fun. It's a little bit different than most perspectives, but that's one of the reasons it makes it fun. So yeah, it goes back a long ways.
Yeah, and usually these are races that people are a little hesitant to play because there's not a lot of information, as I said. So
yeah.
What should viewers who feel that uneasiness about two-year-old races maybe turn their attention towards? Is it pedigree that you really need to get strong at? Is it jockey trainer angles? Like you said, you focus on a certain circuit. I think that probably has something to do with it as well. What do you think, if you had to put a weighting on what's most important to get better at two-year-old races, where would you focus?
Sure. It's a great question. I always start with the trainer. I think the trainer's key. You know, of course, we're talking about Keeneland, so we'll talk a lot about Wesley Ward today, but it really does start with that trainer, in my opinion. I would weight that the highest. And it's not just kind of the trainer statistics in two-year-old maiden special races only. It starts there, but it is specifically at the track that they're running, and not only the track but the meet. This is a real good example. Ward does okay in the fall at Keeneland, but he obviously, as everybody in the whole world knows, slays the two-year-old maiden special races in the spring. So if you just say Keeneland, two-year-old maiden special weight races, it kind of leans you to Ward, but really, he's a superstar in the spring, and he's probably better than average in the fall. But so it starts with the trainer, it really does, and meat specific, and then I get into pedigree, sire as well as dam. Obviously, sire is important, and most everybody thinks of sire when you talk about pedigree. But it's also the dam, and the other thing, when probably the newest piece that I've really blended into my handicapping here are the nicks, and I call them mix because it's maiden nicking, if you will. So specific how the cross works in 2-year-old maiden special weight races. They may make $1 million. A horse may make $1 million, but if he or she is not good until 4, doesn't help me as a 2-year-old specialist, right? So I take the statistics and specialize and break it down into just the 2-year-old maiden special race weight races in the nicking. So and then then you get into the workouts. That's kind of when you start bringing the actual horse in. Past performances if there are any, and it goes from there. But trainer definitely to start, Colin.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a stat here with Ward who's like 43% with these 2-year-olds. So that's absolutely someone you want to focus on. Now, I have subscribed to Matt Quinn's book, The Complete Handicapper. And in that book, he talks about what to do with not necessarily 2-year-olds, but basically first-time starters.
Right.
And he gave the statistics, and he said, I didn't just pull these out of air. These are statistics you can kind of put your hat on, and that is to combine a trainer that hits at least 11% and a sire that hits on at least 11%.
Okay.
First-time starters. And that was kind of something that I've always had in my head of when I'm going through the past performances, at least from a percentage standpoint. You got to start somewhere. And I think that will probably help you do a good job of maybe weeding out some that you're going to miss on some if you just you can't just go by that, and that's the rule of the thumb. But you also, he also talks about putting the credence in a horse and how much they learn second time out as opposed to first race. And so we have our first race here at Keeneland on. We're going to do Friday. Like I said, the first 2 races are the 2-year-old races. We have a 5.5 furlong for the fillies at Keeneland on Friday. This is maiden special weight. And you have a race here where you have a couple horses who, 4 of them, who actually have a race under their belts.
Yep.
Really jumped off the paper at me from those first races that they had as compared to the 5 in the second leg, who I think was in a much better, at least first-time race. So when you looked at this first race here on Friday, where did you land on? What popped out at you?
Sure, yeah. I actually went with my pick is actually a horse that has already run one time. Number 9, Her Holy Name. It's John Hancock's horse. Ran a couple weeks ago, obviously at Keeneland. Finished 3rd, but was running well at the end. It was a sloppy track that day, and got beat by one of Ward's monsters. That nobody was going to beat his horse that day. But yeah, number 9, Her Holy Name. And the other thing I liked about it, couple other things is Tyler Gaffleone picked up the mount. He didn't ride her first time out, and it turns out that this one's John Stewart's. It's Resolute Racing is the owner. So interested to see how he does with this 2-year-old. But 10-1 morning line odds, and she actually went off 3-1 in that first race, which I look at sometimes too, Colin. And again, like you said, nothing really, is set in gold to say if this happens, you got to pick this horse, or if this happens, you can't pick that horse. But I do like to see when a horse has run one time, like you said, that second time out angle works an awful lot. Horses learn, especially at this age, they learn a lot when they run, get more comfortable, and she went off 3-1. So I there's a lot of ways we could go in this race here. Ward's horse is always an obvious pick, but I try to stay away from them as much as I can, just because that's kind of like shooting fish in a barrel. But I often say, you can't just bet against Ward every time, because you're going to rip up an awful lot of tickets. You got to pick the winner, even if it's short odds. But I'm going to try for a longer one here in the first, number 9, Her Holy Name.
Yeah, and I can't argue though. I included this horse on my ticket as well for what you said. As far as the second time out, I thought the speed figure was pretty good for the fact that the first race was over the slop. 10-1 seems, when I saw it 10-1, usually when I go, oh wow, I'm getting 10-1, that's usually not what you end up getting. But I've started using Race Lens a little bit, and I did some digging as I knew I was talking with you. And this 9, the sire is Cantheros. He's hit at 23% with second-time starters on the turf sprint. So, I've done a lot of digging in the last 2 nights, going through some, trying to get used to Race Lens and the amount of angles you can go through. You can spend hours in there, and it's a lot of fun. Right. But it can also make you go a little bit crazy because if you start chasing them all. But in these types of races, I feel like if there's any place to spend a lot of time and maybe trying to find some of that angles, this is the type of race to do that in. As you said, adding Tyler, I think that's a huge plus here for this horse as well. So I will also include the number 9. I did add 2 more on my ticket. I had the Wesley Ward horse 4th on my ticket, and it was a little bit of a defensive, and I took the 7 off because I said I'm going to use the Ward in the next one. I think he's a better horse than you got here in this race. So we are both flirting with fire and not using the Ward. I did decide to use the number 8 as well, Boys Blank. The dam was 2 for 3 with first-time starters winners. One of them was on the synthetic. And so a little bit of as much of a digging as I can do, but this trainer's actually hit with some pretty nice scores, or at least one nice score so far here. Not one that I'm necessarily familiar with, but when I see the plus 999 ROI for the Keeneland meet, I know that he hit with something nice. So Boys Blank for a dam who's had a couple of precarious horses for her. And then the other one I'm going to use is the number 6. And as I said, I've been a little Race Lens heavy, but I pulled this graphic here for people. This is supposed to be on the number 6. Sire, More Than Ready. The past 5 years with 2-year-olds turf sprinting, 161 starts. You're getting a 20-win percentage with a positive ROI of 51% and 48% in the money. So that was a horse that I absolutely digging through. This horse by the name of Goth with trainer Michael Maker. Louis Saez aboard is an angle I love in turf sprints because he's going to go and he's good on the lead. And if there's an opportunity that I want to have a horse on the lead, it's in a race like this, right? Because a lot of these 2-year-olds maybe find themselves behind and then they don't necessarily maybe know what to do yet, or they get uncomfortable, right?
No doubt.
And so those are 2 things that maybe you need to pay attention to here as well. So.
Yeah, no, that's those are good plays. I like that. And that last one you mentioned, number 6, Goth. I kind of looked at him long and hard. That last workout too that I show, April 17th at Turfway Park. Of course, it's over the synthetic from the gate. He went in under 48 seconds. He went in 47.8 seconds. So 3 out of 20. He, awfully good work. I think. Kind of as a tune-up to come into this one. So, I think that's a good play, and it's interesting that you picked up on the dam of number 8, and that's something 1% of the people will pick up on. 2% of the people, it won't be very much. Will it be enough to win? I don't know. I'm not sure about the trainer. I don't love First Samurai, but I like those. I like the thoughts on those picks.
Yeah, it's me picking. So my viewers know if I pick them, they're probably going to fade and go elsewhere. But you mentioned workouts. Let's just talk about that really quick. And I'll go back to the book that I read. It's you usually want to see 2 workouts at least 48 seconds, because ignore those 3 furlong workouts, because any horse can go fast for 3 furlongs. Is sort of the concept that I've bought into. And actually, you had a couple horses here who were littered with 3 furlong workouts at 35 seconds. And sometimes that might trick people because, like I said, a lot of horses, as we see in the sales, they're putting up 10 seconds, which isn't necessarily a good thing in my opinion, but it just shows that a lot of horses can be really fast, really quick.
Sure.
Can they do it for a longer extended period of time? So Is there you had mentioned the horse that went 47 seconds in that workout.
Yep.
What are your guidelines? What are you looking at when you're looking at those works?
Sure. Yeah. So I agree with you. The 3 furlong ones, I don't give them as much credit. However, this time of year, you really don't see that many 4 furlong workouts. I mean, it's
True.
probably, I don't know, 80-20 if you counted all the 3 furlong works versus 4 furlong works, and almost never see a 5 furlong work. I saw one when I was studying some races today, but very, very rare this time of year to see a 5 furlong work. I would agree with you wholeheartedly as we get a little bit deeper into the year. But I do like to see, number one, works over the track. Again, this is a turf race, so they're not going to work on the turf that much. So that's a little bit, not applicable here. But I like to see a work on the track. I like to see, a fair amount of workouts, as they get deeper into the year. I like to see at least 5 or 6 or 7 workouts for a first-time starter to have a little depth underneath them. And I'll also add up the number of furlongs total. In other words, if it's run 5 3-furlong races, obviously to make the math easy, it's 15 total furlongs. But, if it's sprinkled in some 4 furlong workouts, I should say, it might be up closer to, 18 or 19 total furlongs. And each furlong makes a big difference this time of year, especially. But, I like to see some of those longer workouts. It kind of goes back to what you were saying before. So I like to see them fairly quick. I like to see at least one fairly quick workout to kind of know that the horse can move. But, when you got some guys like Asmussen or even Mark Cassey and other trainers, they don't often work their horses very quickly. So I'm not as opposed to taking, a horse that hadn't shown brilliance in the morning or precocity in the morning, if it's certain trainers. But I do like to see them moving pretty good. It's not to say that the fastest workout times are the best, but it doesn't hurt to see a bullet or two, or at least a good time. Like I said, that 47.8 at Turfway is very good. It's not a bullet, but it's pretty darn close.
Yeah, bullets can be overrated to me, especially when you do if you do a pull of data and it gives you wow, this horse has 3 bullets. Well, they were 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 5. And
good point. Good point.
It's who are they really beating?
No, it's a great point. I call those small bullets. They if only 4 work that day, you can't beat more than 3 others, right? I mean, you can't do better than 1, but it's you're right. 3 out of 80 is a heck of a lot better than 1 out of 4, I think, in most cases. But again, when I say better, I mean faster and not necessarily better. I try to watch as many workouts as possible. I mean, there's a lot of services now that will show these workouts, and you can watch the replays. I'm learning more and more as far as watching. They talk about how a horse gets over the track and how a horse moves, and watching their ears and so forth. So I can't say I'm an expert on that, but if you can pick up where a horse is doing it fairly easily and doesn't seem to be blowing and keeps going pretty well past the wire or the furlong pull it's working out to, it's obviously a bonus.
Yeah, one thing I've gotten really good at, I don't get to the track a lot, but when I get up to Saratoga from our yearly trip on the 2-year-old races, there is a way to just see the horse that looks professional.
Exactly.
And he walks, and I can now I know to bet them because I've actually done a good job on this horse looks very professional, and then they win. They're just focused. They're walking straight. They're not looking around. There's got a demeanor about them in a way.
You're right.
And if you pick up on that in person, I highly suggest those that are fortunate enough to be on the track and see that. We don't see that from afar. If you're working or if you're watching on TV, even, you're not necessarily going to see that little detail. So when you do go to the track, pay attention to that. Is there, if there's gaps in workouts, is that something that you kind of notice? Because I try to see what's the pattern, and if it's every 7 days and then suddenly there's 2 or 3 weeks that there's not, you got to think about weather. Like Oakland had all that rain, and you got to kind of make those mental notes and why maybe they didn't work for a period of time, which is very hard to keep up with all of that. But does that scare you off at all? I like the idea of counting workout furlongs. That's great.
I'll total them up. Again, especially for first time starters. To some extent that will worry me. I guess the flip side of that though is to say that if some people will say, oh, if they're not working out exactly every 7 days, there's a problem. And that's not accurate at all. I like to see a fairly regular cadence, but I'm not tied to every 7 days or every 8 days or what have you. If there's a big break, like you said, that can't be attributed to weather, maybe there's something going on. But as long as they got back on the work tab, and have shown some reasonable moves since since the break, I'm okay with it. These 2-year-olds are quirky, right? I mean, they can, the good trainers will protect them. And if they've get, just a little bit dinged up, maybe they'll take them off for a couple of weeks. So again, I don't always see that as a negative, but it's a great point. I mean, and what's really neat, Colin, is you started and you're exactly right. A lot of people say, oh, I'm not going to play those 2-year-olds because there's not enough on paper. I mean, how many things have we already talked about here in the first 10, 12 minutes, 15 minutes of our discussion, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
awesome.
There's a lot of nuances, that's not necessarily written on the paper. And that's one of the reasons I like it, is because, if it was just all written and all in front of you, you really don't have an edge over anybody else. I kind of gravitate towards these things because you can develop an edge over the other players. So good stuff.
Well, speaking of those good trainers, we have Wesley Ward, who comes back here on race 2 on Friday with two 2-year-olds, the number 4 Spun Lovin' and the number 7 Burning Pine. Now, I typically start on horse 1 and start to make my way down, and I saw Ward on a 5-2 when I got to number 4, and I said, okay, this is probably your favorite. Then I kept going, and I went, okay, it's Ward, and he brings in Rosario. And one thing I've noticed about Ward, the horses that he wins with at 2-year-olds, generally, and this is no disrespect to Corrales, but usually when I was looking at the results, it was the Ortiz and the Rosario and the big names that you see. And then you see the 4-5 morning line with this number 7 Burning Pine. What'd you pick up on this horse?
Yeah. That's one of the things, Colin. You hit it right out of the gate there. And if you remember last spring at Keeneland for these 2-year-olds, which you probably didn't track them specifically, but you're spot on. You're good in the sense that you picked that up. Rosario rode most of his winners last year. I don't think he's ridden any of his winners this year. I may have missed one. I think he's won 5 of the 7 races that they've had. Ward has, but I don't think he's had Rosario on. But anyway, he'll ride this one. And I mean, I like the dam. The dam through a colt named Neat, which you may remember. It was by Constitution, won a couple graded stakes races and $350,000, won 4 of 6 races. And that horse also won second time out when he was a 2-year-old at Laurel. So, and I think she also has another one that won first time out. Of course, this guy's by Nyquist, and I really like Nyquist. He's one of my favorites. Constitution, Nyquist, obviously Into Mischief, but there's a few others. But I love Nyquist, and of course, this one's by Nyquist. He's been working awfully well. I believe he's got 5 works over the Keeneland main track. 4-5 is silly, right? But I could not pick Ward 2 races in a row, and this one just stands so far out to me. Like I was saying before, I mean, we can pick against can pick against them, but or pick against her, but I have to go with her if I'm really being serious about trying to find the winner.
Yeah, I felt the same way as you did. Ward has not had Rosario aboard for any wins this year so far. It's Johnny V and Tyler Gaffleone. 4 out of the 5 wins. I absolutely felt the way you did as far as you left them off in the first race. Don't leave them off again with this one. And I kind of did play that game of, okay, which one do I think is more likely? Unfortunately, 4-5 for sure. But I am going to use that angle of horses with their second time out on the 5 here, Baytown Boo Boo. The 3 also ran, but the Fig came back so slow that I don't necessarily know that there's much there. And I think that the race that this 5 came out of, 3 of them all came back with Equibase speed figures in the mid to high 80s in that race. So I think that race was actually maybe a little bit more, I know it was more competitive than what we saw what the horses ran in the first race. Not as much that I found, at least digging into the pedigree, as much to play on Baytown Boo Boo. So it was a little bit more of A, I'm getting a nice price, and B, if we talked about earlier, horses are going to learn from that first race and improve second time out. I have no problem just putting the extra dollar to take another shot here with this 5.
Yeah, I like that. And I don't know if you noticed, you may have, Colin, but this one was bred by Larry Best and OXO Equine. And I'm a big fan of his. I think he only has good, really good horses. He bred it and then must have sold it to McEntee's group in a private sale because it doesn't show anything publicly. But of course, it's owned by McEntee and a partner. And the other thing, it's by a first year stallion, Instagram. So good pick. I think it'll be an interesting. That's an interesting horse. Again, I just don't see Ward losing 2 races in a row with 3 horses, but it can happen.
It can, but like I said earlier, he's 43% on a wide range of the numbers were staggering over years that he hits at 43% with 2-year-olds.
It's crazy. Yeah. I mean, in the last 5 years, he's won 23 races out of 51. So pretty close to that, that right at that 45%. Second most, behind 23 is 4 wins. John Hancock has had 4 wins in the last 5 years. So 23 to 4 is a pretty intimidating, differential. It's that, the sad thing is everybody that's that's out there is going to know that. But again, you got to pick the winner. So yeah, I like Burning Pine.
Friday, April 26th, race 1 and 2 at Keeneland. I'm going to go 6, 8, 9 with your 5, 7. $1 base bet will cost you $6. I love it. 2-year-old edge man just going ice cold. I mean, like you said, I'm just gonna play short. That you're the perfect person for doubling down. We try to keep these tickets low because I always tell my viewers you can't complain to us for the cup of coffee, and for you, it's what can you buy with $1 these days.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah, I just see some of these folks on the internet. They pick 6 or 7 horses, and I'm like, oh my god, a monkey could pick a winner if they get 6 or 7 each. So I've kind of taken it to an extreme, maybe too far. But I'll go through 4 or 5 on Past the Wire that interest me, and then I'll always pick one and let that one ride and see what happens.
Yeah, your content is outstanding for 2-year-olds and all of my Game of Silks players that tune in. I think I have 5 or 6 races this week, so I'm really excited about my horses coming up for Game of Silks. But the Game of Silks community is dialed in on 2-year-olds right now and pedigree, and these are crypto guys that are getting interested in horse racing. So if you're out there, I know some of his content gets dropped in the Discord. But maybe if you're not in the Discord, be sure to check him out over at pastthewire.com. Are you any interest in the Derby, or are you already looking to 2025?
I do. And if I could just make a shameless plug here. I wrote my first book. It's called Handicapping 2-Year-Olds, Handicapping 2-Year-Old Thoroughbreds. It's available on Amazon. But if you look at the horse, let's see if I can get it in the screen there.
There you go.
But if you look at the picture of the horse that I featured on the front of my book, it's Dornoch, actually.
Awesome.
And this was last fall when it started to go to press. So to answer your question, my heart kind of is pulling for Dornoch because of that reason. Of course, being a full brother to Mage, I think would be really interesting storyline. Lots of great storylines, but yeah, I'm kind of pulling for Dornoch.
He's my hometown boy because I live a mile from Old Suffolk Downs, and his dam Puka, her last victory was at Suffolk Downs.
You're kidding.
Yep, no, I'm not kidding. And that's how I found Mage last year. I was like, oh, look at this damn her last win was at Suffolk Downs. So there was kind of this cool little thing that I talked about. And then he went and won, and that made it cool. And then Dornock comes back, and I'm like, oh, this is really cool. I wish Dornock had a little bit better of a performance in his last there rating.
Yeah.
I think he seems like he might only have one option, and that's to go. And I don't know how that will work out for him. You want to be further placed in the back, I think, but we'll see. That's
exactly. Yeah, I was really high on him, but that Bluegrass was a little disappointing. But you just never know. You think about Rich Strike and some of these others that just make no sense. You could make a case for this for Dornock and a lot of reasons, but that last race really, I guess the good news is you're going to get some reasonable odds on him, right? I think 15 to 1 was the last thing I saw, in that range at least, where it would have been probably 4 or 5 to 1 if he had won the Bluegrass. So yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm originally from Louisville, so love the Derby, love everything about it, but other than 2-year-olds, that's really the only thing I'll follow.
I have a 2-year-old Mackenzie in Game of Silk, so I'm excited about that horse. So
yeah. I did a piece about first crop sires and Mackenzie. I had way up there, if not on top. He was second. I can't remember, to be honest with you, but I think I had him on top. So hopefully you'll do real well with him. And the Game of Silks does a great job. It's really neat. They're bringing new people, like you said, the crypto guys and some other folks into the sport of Kings here, and they're nice people over there too. So I'm glad they support what you're doing, Colin.
Thank you so much. Check them out at silks.io. Check out 2-Year-Old Edgeman as 2-Year-Old Edge on your Twitter or X, or also at Past the Wire for the excellent content. Good luck to everybody. Plenty of Kentucky Derby content just coming daily now. Every day you're going to get spotlight videos on every contender. We've got pace scenarios. I gave you the history of the Kentucky Derby going through the media guide on Monday. Go check that out. You will not be asking for more Kentucky Derby content if you're sticking here and subscribe to Trust the Profits. Good luck, everybody.